part 21 of my heraldic tour of the Canterbury Cathedral Cloister vault, covering Bay 29, which is largely a Leventhorpe Culpepper family bay. And just to pinpoint its location, it is on the chapter house side of the cloister, the east walk, with its 39 shields. The key interest of this bay is the cadency marks adopted by these two interlinked families. So I will begin with the central boss, this being the badge and arms of Sir John Stanley, a Garter Knight from Lancashire, who had served as steward of the household of Henry IV. The Stanley badge of the Eagle and Child appears to be based on an Irish Arthurian story in which the child is the son of the goodly King Richard, rescued by an eagle and placed at the feet of King Arthur. The badge originated during the reign of Richard II, at whose court Sir John had also been an important figure, with key responsibilities in connection with that king's feared bodyguard of Cheshire archers. As can be seen from the arms of the Kingdom of Man, which are also on the badge, he was ruler of that island. The motto, being emitted from the mouth of the eagle, must necessarily have been short, and I speculate that it might have been the motto of the Garter Knights, Ich Dien. There is no particular connection between Stanley and the main subject of Bay 29, which is largely an extended pedigree of the family of Leventhorpe. But John Leventhorpe, as the Receiver General and Attorney General of the Duchy of Lancaster, would necessarily have worked closely with Sir John Stanley. On the 31st of March 1413, the eldest son and heir of Sir John Stanley was received into the cathedral confraternity. The Stanley arms had previously been placed in the Royal Bay 32, constructed in May-June 1413. Bay 29 itself was constructed by my estimation between November and December 1413. There are 12 Leventhorpe shields in this bay, and a further 9 that represent direct Leventhorpe family connections. Together with the shields of the related family of Culpepper of Oxenhoath in Kent, the corpus of heraldry represented in this bay is quite well known for providing numerous examples of what heraldists call cadency, by which we mean the modification of arms to denote different members of a given family. I move now to the bay as I believe it would have looked in medieval times. The Leventhorpe marriages represented by impalements here are the key with which we can unlock an understanding of this family grouping. The main sponsor of the grouping, the King's Esquire John Leventhorpe of Yorkshire, bore the Leventhorpe arms with a crescent for difference. This crescent was inherited from his deceased father, Robert Leventhorpe of Swillington, whose arms we see at 18, impaling those of his second wife, Alice Clavering, of which more will be said later. Robert in turn inherited the crescent from his father, an earlier John Leventhorpe, who evidently married a daughter of the knightly family of Swillington, as we see his arms with a crescent at 26 impaling those of Swillington. The third impalement at 24 celebrates the marriage well over 2 decades previously between John Leventhorpe's daughter Catherine and Sir John Culpepper of Oxenhoath. What we don't have here are either the arms of John Leventhorpe's wife Catherine Riley or those of his mother Isabel Totty, contrary to what has been written previously. These inclusions and omissions probably indicate that John Leventhorpe had a slight chip on his shoulder about his social status below the rank of knight, making him want to vaunt his connections with more ancient and knightly families in preference to the recently gentrified families of his wife and mother. It is a curious fact that this lifelong servant of the House of Lancaster was knighted neither by Henry IV nor by Henry V, both of whom he served with equal diligence, and the only explanation seems to be one of perceived social inferiority. John had a half-brother who took the mullet as his cadency mark. That his mother was the Clavering heiress is shown by the presence of his arms at number 11, quartering Clavering. He was likely already deceased by 1413, as there is a quartering in Bay 8 with the arms of a mystery wife, those of the wife, left blank, being placed in the first quarter, used elsewhere in the cloister to indicate that the wife was the donor. We find 6 of the 9 cadency marks which came to be systematised in the post-medieval period being used by the sons of the Leventhorpe family, viz. The label, the crescent, the mullet, the annulet, the rose and the martlet, but not in accordance with the later rules. At what point these later rules came to be uniformly applied in England remains to be determined. Traditionally this is thought to have originated in Tudor times, but I have found many examples from the Elizabethan era of non-observance of the rules. John Leventhorpe's eldest son John kept his father's crescent and added a label during his father's lifetime, seen at 28. But his second and third sons utilised the annulet and the martlet later accorded to fourth and fifth sons. Moreover, what later became the second son's mark, the crescent, was already in use by the head of this cadet branch of the family, whose brother was already using the mullet, later applied to the third son. The undifferenced arms of Leventhorpe at number 20 belonged to the family head Geoffrey Leventhorpe of Bradford in Yorkshire, while his eldest son bore the same with a label for difference at 27. The Leventhorpe arms difference with a rose and with a border are for cousins of John. The former you will find in Bay 18. The Culpepper family, with its 7 shields in this bay, shows even more clearly than Leventhorpe that the use of cadency marks had not been systematised in this period. The head of the Oxenhoath cadet branch of the family, Sir John Culpepper, had inherited from his father the annulet as his distinguishing mark. The eldest son of Oxenhoath changed the annulet to a mullet during his father's lifetime to avoid confusion with the eldest son of the main line at Bayhall, who used the label for difference. The mullet on the bend, which we see at number 16, is for John, eldest son of Sir John of Oxenhoath and grandson of John Leventhorpe. His father's annulet is at 35. The cadency mark has been either accidentally or perhaps deliberately omitted from the impaled arms for Sir John's marriage to Catherine Leventhorpe. Such absences have been noted elsewhere in the cloister, with the impalement itself being regarded as sufficient to identify the bearer. The crescent cadency mark at 37 is attested for Peter Culpepper, third son of Sir John, which means that the martlet at 15 must belong to his elder brother William, who was the second son. Both of these brothers were also grandsons of John Leventhorpe. This leaves Culpepper differenced with a border at number 8, which probably belonged to Sir John's cousin, another John Culpepper. A person of that name was steward of the Archbishop's lands prior to his own death around 1405. Sir John's grandfather, Walter Culpepper, is here at 12. He bore as his mark of difference an altered field colour, with the field changed from silver to gold. As porter of Leeds Castle in Kent, he was involved in the famous refusal to permit the Queen entry into the castle in 1322, for which he was hanged from the walls. He was essentially being killed for his adherence to the then Earl of Lancaster in opposition to Edward II. There is a decidedly East Anglian flavour to most of the remaining shields in the bay. John Leventhorpe's own landed interest was built up in Essex and Hertfordshire. At 39 is Breton of Layer Breton in Essex, tenants of the Duchy of Lancaster and therefore known to John Leventhorpe. The ancient arms of Clavering at 29 vaunt Leventhorpe's connection with this ancient and noble family which originated in Essex. Their quarterly arms adopted in the early 13th century in descent from the family of Vere. The version difference with a crescent impaling Leventhorpe at 18 and also at 23 is that of the London branch of the Claverings, who were wealthy drapers. The Kentons of Suffolk at 30 were also Lancastrian retainers. There is a small grouping for the East Anglian families of Mortimer of Attleborough and of Harling. I have speculated in my book on the basis of family history that the unicorn arms of Harling at 34 and 9 might originally have derived from a pub sign. They belonged to Sir Robert Harling, whose mother was Cecily Mortimer of Attleborough. Her parents of Mortimer Impaling Park are at 31. Cecily's grandmother was a member of the Norfolk family of Fastolf, the Fastolf arms being at number 36, while her half-brother was Sir John Fastolf KG, who bore a different version of the Fastolf arms to the one in this bay. There is another small grouping for the Findon family of Derbyshire, which also had strong links with the Duchy of Lancaster. John de Findon at number 32 is of particular interest here in that he was a known religious Protestant. In connection with, in September 1413, only a month before the Findon arms went up in the cloister, he was summoned before the Chancellor, Bishop Henry Beaufort, to receive a warning. The warning was of no avail, and the following January he was imprisoned in the Tower for heresy. Findon was clerk of a streets at the Exchequer, and is likely to have known John Leventhorpe. At 7 is an impalement for Finden's marriage to Catherine de Ashton of Lancashire, while at 33 is another impalement for his son John de Finden the Younger and his daughter-in-law Joan Foucher of Derbyshire. The son bore the chevron engrailed during his father's lifetime, and the usage of the plain chevron might indicate that the father had died and that the donor was his widow. The uncommon usage of the dolphin in the Foucher arms is unexplained. There is a Kent-Sussex trio of shields on the wall side. The arms of Sir Nicholas Hout, a former Sheriff of Kent, are at number 3. He was closely associated with Archbishop Arundel and became a member of the Cathedral Confraternity in 1409. At number 2 are the pelicans of Sir John Pelham of Sussex, a King's Knight of Henry IV, holder of Pevensey Castle and Chief Steward of the Duchy of Lancaster south of the Trent. He was admitted to the Cathedral Confraternity in 1408. The Setvan's arms, once at number 1, are now lost, but the 3 winnowing fans of Setvans were here differenced with a chevron. I have speculated that the chevron may have been used by the eldest son of the Setvans family of Milton next Sittingbourne, the head of which bore a crescent for difference, arms which can be seen in Bay 25. If this theory is correct, the arms would be for John III de Setvans, who was an esquire of the body of Henry V in 1415. The family held property in Ashneck Sandwich, of which the Archbishop was overlord. John de Setvans was linked to the Stablegate family of Canterbury, whose arms are, I believe, at number 13. This is a new identification. The horse harness on the shield would appear to be an obvious canting emblem for the family. The arms of William Scroop, Earl of Wiltshire, at 6 represent an overspill from Bay 30, the Bay of Reconciliation, he being one of the 8 men who accused the Earl of Arundel of treason in 1397. Scroop was executed in 1399 and died without issue. The arms were probably sponsored by his brother, whose arms are in Bay 13. There is a link with the central boss in that Scroop was Lord of Man prior to his execution. You will find a great deal more information in the pages of my book, Great Cloister, A Lost Canterbury Tale, published by Archaeopress in 2020. It's more than just a book about the cloister, as it goes into considerable detail about each unique shield, tracing its origins. You will find here many of the great families of England up to the reign of Henry IV, and also the European kingdoms. It comprises over 700 pages, including 771 illustrations, 37 pedigrees and a detailed index. You are seeing here just a small selection of the pages. Shortly you will see on the screen details of how to find it. If you would like me to undertake research on your own family, I can be contacted via my personal website, drpaulfoxfsa.com. And finally, do please subscribe to my History and Heraldry channel on YouTube, which of course costs you nothing, so that you can follow additions to my list of talks.